The mall was buzzing with people, the sound of chatter mixing with the faint holiday music playing in the background. Ethan Blackwood, one of the wealthiest CEOs in the country, walked through the glass doors, surrounded by his assistants carrying shopping bags. To everyone else, he was untouchable, powerful, confident, and unbothered, but inside his life was anything but perfect. His empire was growing, but his heart was empty. Then, something caught his eye. A woman, simple, graceful, and familiar. She wasn't dressed in designer clothes, and she wasn't surrounded by luxury. Yet there was an undeniable glow about her. Ethan froze. It couldn't be. But it was. It was Claire, his ex-wife. The woman he had left 10 years ago when he chose ambition over love. His chest tightened as he watched her laugh with 2 children. Twins, no more than 9 years old. Their laughter echoed across the mall, and then Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The children had his eyes, the same deep green that he saw in the mirror every morning. For the first time in years, the billionaire CEO felt powerless. Ethan remembered that night a decade ago, how he told Claire he needed freedom to focus on his empire, how he convinced himself she would be fine without him, that love could wait. But love hadn't waited. He had chased success, and in doing so, abandoned the only person who had ever loved him selflessly. His heart pounded as he walked toward her. Claire's smile faded when she noticed him. The twins, curious, looked up at the tall stranger. "Mom, who is he?" one of them asked. Claire hesitated, her eyes filled with a mix of pain and strength. Ethan's voice cracked. "They're mine, aren't they?" Claire's silence was louder than any words. Finally, she nodded. "You walked away, Ethan. And I decided I would never let them feel abandoned the way I did. They don't need a billionaire. They need a mother who shows up every day. And I have done that." The weight of her words hit him harder than any corporate loss. For the first time, Ethan realized what he had truly sacrificed, not just a wife, but a family. His empire suddenly felt meaningless. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the twins, a little boy, reached for his hand. "Are you my dad?" he asked innocently. Ethan's throat tightened, tears welling up. He had been ruthless in boardrooms, feared by rivals, yet he had never felt more fragile than in this moment. Claire stepped in, her voice softer now. "Ethan, they don't know your story. They only know kindness. If you want to be in their lives, prove it, not with money, not with gifts, but with consistency." For the first time in years, Ethan chose humility. He knelt down in the middle of the mall, face to face with the twins. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but if you'll let me, I want to earn the chance to know you." The twins looked at each other, then back at him, and smiled. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was hope. That day, Ethan didn't leave the mall with luxury bags or expensive suits. He left with something far more valuable, a second chance. He began small, showing up for school plays, helping with homework, and learning the bedtime stories Claire had memorized by heart. Slowly, walls began to break down. Months later, during a simple family dinner, one of the twins whispered, "I love you, Dad." Ethan broke down in tears, realizing he had built skyscrapers. But this moment was the true height of his life. The story of Ethan and Claire wasn't about wealth, but about rediscovering the humanity he had lost. He learned that success means nothing if you abandon the people who would celebrate your victories without needing anything in return. And so, the billionaire who once had everything but love finally understood family is the one investment that never loses its value. Ethan's journey back into their lives wasn't smooth. At first, the twins only saw him as a stranger who suddenly appeared with nervous smiles and awkward attempts at conversation. Claire kept her distance too, cautious of the man who had once walked away without looking back. But Ethan was determined. This time, he wouldn't quit. Instead of flaunting his wealth, he started small. He learned to cook pancakes on Saturday mornings, burning the first few batches but laughing through the mistakes. He picked them up from school, even when his assistants insisted his schedule was too full. He sat in the bleachers during their soccer games, cheering louder than anyone else, even when his security team cringed at the noise. And slowly, very slowly, the walls began to crumble. One evening, Claire found herself watching Ethan from the kitchen window as he helped their daughter with her science project. He wasn't the ruthless billionaire anymore. He wasn't the man who had left her brokenhearted. He was simply a father, patient, awkward, but fully present. For the first time in years, Claire's guarded heart softened. But just as hope began to grow, another twist came. A business scandal hit Ethan's company. A betrayal from a partner he trusted. The media swarmed him, investors pulled out, and overnight, the man who once stood on top of the financial world was brought to his knees. 10 years ago, Ethan would have drowned himself in ambition, fighting alone, pushing everyone away. But now, things were different. When the headlines broke, Claire expected him to vanish again, to retreat into the man who had once chosen pride over people. But instead, Ethan showed up at her door, not as a CEO seeking sympathy, but as a man seeking refuge. "I lost everything," he admitted, his voice cracking. "Everything except you three. And I don't want to lose you again." In that moment, Claire realized something. Wealth had once defined Ethan. Power had consumed him. But failure stripped all of that away, leaving only the truth of who he was. For the first time, he wasn't hiding behind money. He was showing her his raw, unguarded heart. And the twins, they didn't care about headlines. To them, he wasn't the billionaire on the news. He was just Dad. When his daughter hugged him tightly and whispered, "It's okay, Daddy. We still love you," Ethan broke down in tears. He had spent years building skyscrapers to touch the sky. Yet this little embrace was the only foundation he truly needed. Over time, Ethan rebuilt, not his empire, but his family. His company would recover. But he no longer saw that as his greatest achievement. His true success was found in bedtime stories, in laughter around the dinner table, in the simple joy of being present for the moments money could never buy. The man who once abandoned love discovered that love had the power to rebuild him in ways wealth never could. And so, the story ends not with a billionaire at the top of the world, but with a father, a mother, and two children sitting together, sharing a meal, sharing laughter, and sharing something priceless. Because in the end, the greatest fortune in life isn't measured in dollars, but in the hearts we hold close. Months turned into a year, and Ethan's life looked nothing like it once had. The man who used to dine with world leaders and negotiate billion-dollar contracts now found himself happiest sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, playing board games with his children. His mansion felt cold and empty, so he sold it. Instead, he moved closer to Claire and the twins into a modest home where laughter filled every corner. At first, people whispered, "How can a man like Ethan Blackwood live such a simple life?" But Ethan no longer cared. For so long, he had lived for the approval of strangers, but now the only eyes that mattered were the ones that lit up when he walked through the door after school pickup. Still, a question lingered between him and Claire. Could they ever find their way back to each other? She had built a life without him. She had carried the weight of parenthood alone for nearly a decade. Forgiveness wasn't simple, and love couldn't just be picked up where it was left. One evening, during the twins' school recital, Ethan watched as his son stood nervously on stage. The boy stumbled over his lines, his hands shaking. The audience chuckled softly, but before embarrassment could swallow him, Ethan stood up in the middle of the crowd. "You've got this, buddy," he called out, clapping loud enough for the entire hall to hear. The boy smiled, his confidence restored, and he finished his part perfectly. The crowd applauded. But Claire's eyes didn't leave Ethan. In that moment, she saw not the man who had once left her, but the man her children deserved. The man who had finally learned that love requires showing up, not just once, but every single day. After the recital, Claire approached him. For the first time in 10 years, she reached for his hand. "You've changed, Ethan," she whispered. "You've really changed." He looked at her, eyes filled with sincerity. "I lost you once because I thought money was everything. I don't want to lose you again. Not now. Not ever. But this time it's your choice." Silence hung between them until Claire squeezed his hand gently. "Then don't prove it with promises. Prove it with tomorrow, and the day after, and every day after that." Ethan nodded, knowing that redemption wasn't a finish line. It was a lifelong journey, and this time he was ready to walk it. The twins ran up, wrapping their arms around both of them, their laughter echoing under the night sky. For the first time, it felt like a family, not broken, not incomplete, but whole again. And so, the billionaire who once abandoned love discovered the greatest truth of all: success fades, wealth disappears, but love, the kind that forgives, endures, and rebuilds, is eternal. Time passed, and life began to settle into a rhythm that Ethan had never known before. For years, his days had been consumed by boardrooms, stock markets, and endless travel. But now, mornings began with the smell of coffee brewing in Claire's kitchen and the sound of laughter echoing down the hallway. Every day was a test of humility. Ethan wasn't perfect. There were times he still made mistakes, times he almost slipped back into his old habits of distraction and pride. But each time, he reminded himself of the promise he had made to show up, not just with words, but with presence. He became the dad who walked his kids to school, even when meetings were waiting. The man who left his phone in another room during dinner, choosing conversation over contracts. The father who stayed up late to help finish a last-minute science project, even if it meant showing up tired to an early board meeting the next morning. And the more he gave himself to this new life, the more he realized something profound. He hadn't just returned to his family. They had saved him. His children taught him patience. Claire taught him forgiveness. And together, they taught him the one thing he had never learned while chasing billions, the meaning of enough. But life, as it always does, had one more test waiting. One night, after a long day, Ethan sat with Claire on the porch while the twins played in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and pink. Claire turned to him and asked softly, "Ethan, if everything fell apart again tomorrow, if you lost your company, your money, everything, would you still stay?" He didn't hesitate. He reached for her hand, his voice steady but tender. "Claire, I already lost it all once. And I realized that what mattered most wasn't gone. It was right here waiting for me. I'll never walk away again. Because this," he gestured to her, to the twins laughing under the fading sunlight, "this is my real empire." Claire's eyes glistened with tears, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from hope, from healing, and from the quiet realization that sometimes even the most broken stories can be rewritten into something beautiful. As the twins ran toward them, their arms wrapping tightly around their parents, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that he had found the one thing he had been searching for all along. Not power, not wealth, but belonging.